Hello and welcome. This here, of course, is Sir Donald Bradman, and the life-size sculptor of Bradman is on display at Bowral, New South Wales, Bradman's hometown. It's the work of sculptor Tanya Bartlett, and Tanya's not only famous for her sculptures of sporting personalities, she's also famous for her sculptures of racehorses, including Reduced Choice, Schnitzel and Octagonal. But right at the moment she's working on a big project, the Racemare Winx. And of course the unveiling of the Winx project is put on hold this year and will probably take place sometime late next year. I caught up with Tanya this week to ask her how the Winx project is going and how it all got started to sculpturing these brilliant statues. Well, Tanya Bartlett, thank you very much for having me in your home here and sitting down to have a chat with me.
That's a pleasure, Steve.
Tanya, it all started in Gunnedah, where you grew up. Tell me about growing up in the country areas of New South Wales.
Gunnedah. It was a great place to grow up. I think it was, my childhood was fantastic, so I was very, very fortunate. As a kid, we lived just out of town on a property. It was just a hobby farm. My dad was into all sorts of things, and one month he'd be growing grapes, the next month he'd be planting crops, and then, of course, always horses around an area like Gunnedah. So it was a wonderful time.
And you ended up being a jewelleroo.
Yes. So finishing school, I had a gap year, or 2 gap years, and went out to the bush out the back of Moree, a place called Garra, where I worked properties around the area, did everything from a bit of sheep work, cattle work, horse work, teaching kids, all sorts of things, a bit of gardening, whatever. Yeah, it was great.
Turned your hand to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't long before you made a decision to move overseas, and what prompted that?
In between the jewellerooing and the gap years and travelling, I fitted in 4 years of university. So the reason for the gap years was, apart from being drawn to the bush, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of put off university. I kept deferring. I had ideas about architecture, about vet science, about all sorts of things growing up, but never really knew what it was going to be. So I did decide on something to do, and that was teaching. So I went to university for 4 years and studied secondary teaching, majoring in art. So the art thing had followed me from childhood.
Right.
It was like horses and art over the 2
Went
things.
together.
Yep, horses, art, country, that sort of thing. Yeah, and so uni, I did uni. I did the teaching, majored in art, and I had my horses in the paddock, and so 4 years of that. But coming out of that, when you do teaching, you do 4 episodes of prac teaching as part of your course. So I'd done the 4 pracs, and they were okay, but it wasn't yelling at me that was what I was ready to do. So I did what I always did and went, righto, I've got to go and do something else or run away from it or whatever. But I was getting a bit older now, so I think I was about 25, 26. So I spoke to a friend, and I'd been competing on horses while I was at uni, and had an eventer and a dressage horse, and this huge desire that I'd also had as a child to compete at the Olympics in the eventing. Anyway, so I found another girlfriend who was equally as keen, and we chatted and made this plan that we were going to go overseas together, and we were going to pursue this eventing career and work in horse yards and do all of that. And so we did. We did. We left together and started the overseas journey.
Fantastic. Now, art can be a pretty diverse subject. How did art then lead to sculpting?
Okay, so while I was at school, I didn't really do any sculpture. I think we did the pinch pots that you put together and you put ears on and a curly tail and then slot in the top and the big money boxes. In year 12, I really hadn't done any sculpting apart from the pig money boxes. And then into uni, I had to do a whole lot of prac work as part of the teaching requirements because I was doing art. It's like if you do PE, you've got to do your PE stuff. So art, you have to do your different things. So I did photography and screen printing and painting and everything else except for sculpture. But what I did do was ceramics, and the ceramics was for some people they were doing plates and things like that. But I started doing these ceramic horses, and that's how it all started. And so I was, spending my time on the weekends writing, and then at uni I was doing my lectures and all of that sort of thing. But then in the time out, I was doing these ceramic horses that were part of the requirements for uni. But then these horses started to come to events with me because my friends would say, "Can you make me one?" And I go, "Yeah, okay." And it wasn't until my parents actually decided that they were going to put some of these horses in a gallery sometime later that they actually became artworks or whatever.
Right.
But I did also put one in the local saddlery with George Andrews here in Newcastle, and he used to just ring me up when it had sold, and I kind of had a tab running there. And so I'd go in and I'd get a new set of reins and go, "Yeah, that's all right. You better bring another ceramic horse in." And so it was, a good relationship with that. And then I think it was Equestrian Australia. So word got around, and they asked me to do some trophies for a dressage event in Sydney at one stage. But anyway, I finished my uni degree. I lent my horses out to other people, took off overseas with Deb, and that's when I went back to the ceramics, but it was a bit of a story, which I can go into. So I went back to London and I did a bit of teaching, and I joined a ceramic workshop there because I went, you know what, I've got to go back to my ceramic horses. That's where I can get a lump sum, because every time I'd get paid, there'd be something on, there'd be some trip to go on, and I hadn't been home for 3 years. So I went to London, started teaching. I was working a pub job at night, and then in the time out I was doing these ceramic horses. So I had about 6 or 7 of them complete. They didn't blow up in the kiln, and I thought, right, how do I get these in front of people? And so I rang up a friend who was a groom, and she said, "Rightio, why don't you bring them to badminton?" I'm like, "That's a good idea." And so she organised, pulled a few strings, and I was able to stay at badminton horse trials, which is the big horse event over there, huge. Walked around the trade stands in the morning and kept presenting one of these ceramic horses to all the trade stands, but they kept turning me away. And so I'm thinking, it's such a good plan. I've got to, and then there's...
As what normally happens when you're trying to pursue your own career and you've got your own artwork there or photography, and many a successful career has been started by being turned away by recording studios or film producers. And I was just, and I just thought, no, I can't give up. And I thought, I've just got to think a bit differently. And so I'd been approaching all the trade stands that were selling arty things or whatever. And then I saw this fellow, and he had a stand set up with cast aluminium furniture, outdoor furniture. And it was just kind of a little bit, there's not a lot to that trade stand. And he was there on his own. And anyway, I had one of them, and I just stuck it in the middle of his table. And then I went over and I introduced myself and chatted to him, and he, what's going on? I said, well, I've got about 7 of these, and I'm trying to, work out where I can put them, because I've just come here in the hope that I might sell them, and I haven't paid for a trade stand. And anyway, he was stoked. He said, look, they're great, and I need someone to help me on the trade stand. And so I can take a break, and it was just perfect. Perfect. It's amazing how we can find little turning points in our lives which center us in a different direction.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Absolutely. There seems so many of those, and it is It's amazing.
Some of you, reading through and looking on your website, some of the ones you've done, like Les Darcy and Tommy Smith and Octagonal, and they're incredibly lifelike, and I'm in awe of your talent. And just, you told me a little bit of a story about William Inglison's son and the opening of their new complex down at Warwick Farm, and the rush, well, not the rush job in your terms, because from August, you first got the brief, and then you had to deliver in January. I mean,
I was nervous, but it was a very tight deadline. But I did have a chat with the girl that I was working with, who was sort of briefing me on the job, and as they decided to go ahead with it, we made sure we had I did ask that they have a plan B.
Contingency plan.
Yes.
Because at the time you were due to go on a holiday to the United States, so you virtually had to finish it and then send it to the foundry. And then leave it with them until you came back.
Leave it with them, which I've never done. But I've gotten better at it since.
But the finished product is absolutely outstanding.
Well, thank you.
I mean, it's something that I've never seen before, and when I did take my breath away when I did see it for the first time. And I mean, you've shown me your studio here, and some of the detail on some of them is incredible. And like I say, I'm in awe of your talent. But well, Tanya, tell us, what's the process of taking your rough sketch or your rough model to the life-size image that we see in here today?
Okay, well, it's a long process, I have to say. So I start off, as you said, my sketch is actually always a plasticine sketch, just a little one, varying from this size to sort of this size. I might do several of those for a concept, to develop the concept, different ideas, and present it to whoever's commissioning me, and then we sort of narrow it down. And once we've decided on that, then I'll do a maquette, which is a 1/4 size. Or a 1/3 size, just a little bit bigger than that. So once I'm at work on that, and I might work on that for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, and we have a fairly good maquette idea developed and ready. Then I'll get approval for that, and then we work on the enlarging. Nowadays, I take advantage of 3D scanning, so I can have my 1/4 maquette, bigger than this one, and have it 3D scanned.
Fantastic. Technology's been a great help to you then.
It has been absolutely fabulous, because it certainly means that it makes the job more enjoyable. So that what happens is I get a digital representation of the maquette, and then we tweak that, because there's little things that don't come out in the scanning, and then that gets sent off to another fellow who cuts a big foam for me, which has an armature built in, so I don't have to do any of that work. And what I receive is an exact scaling up of my smaller maquette. So it may be life size, it may be larger. And then of course I deal with all the issues of going from so small to so big. So I attack the foam, I cut pieces out, or if it's really good translation, then I go straight to work with coating it in plasticine and then working it. So I try to have a centimetre or so of plasticine, but not too much more than that. And I put the detail back into that foam. So about there, we're about halfway to getting to the bronze.
Wow.
With the process side of things. So from there, we once I've finished that, and my clients come in and ticked all the boxes and is happy, we decide we go on to the next stage, which is the mould making. And that's quite an art in itself as well. So that involves taking silicone rubber moulds to make a negative from the positive. The silicone rubber is painted on to the plasticine, and a supporting case is built around that as well. Then those moulds are removed from the plasticine and taken to the foundry, where they're reassembled, and then wax castings are taken from those moulds. And so just pause there. So you have what you end up with there is like it's done in sections from the big one.
Yep.
So you have sections of wax castings of the original. So if you put them all together, it'd be like you had a big Easter egg in wax of the original artwork. Each of those waxes, another mould's made, ceramic mould type of thing, that where the wax is melted out of that, and it's and then the bronze is poured into those moulds.
Wow, so it's not a 5-minute job, and it's not a 5-day job. It could last a month and possibly a lot longer than that. But I'm in awe of your talent, and I guess you are an artist, and therefore once you've started on something, I guess you're forever tweaking it to make sure it looks like the horse or the person you're trying to imitate in bronze. So fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I don't think there's ever an end to a job. I think I could keep going and going, and I'm my worst critic. So well, I hope I'm my worst critic, and but eventually I've just got to go tools down, or someone else will say no, tools down. That's enough. You're right. Because there's a lot to every job, and there's always little things I see, but yeah.
Now, I mentioned in my intro that you're not only famous for sculptures of sporting personalities and musical personalities, but you've also got a riding background, and also you had a highlight in the 2000 Olympics, and I think I've got a bit of footage here showing you at the opening ceremony. How did that come about? I believe it didn't start all that well because you didn't make it through the first auditions.
I heard about the Olympic tryouts, and I had this horse in the paddock that I thought I'd give a go, and give him a go, and took him there, and he didn't behave very well. He hadn't done much. Anyway, I got a letter saying no, I wasn't in, and part of me just sort of went, oh well, don't worry, keep working him, give him a bit more of a chance. You never know. And I'd kind of had that attitude a little bit all through my life. Don't give up. Don't let someone say you can't. Just keep going. So I kept working him, and it was about a week before their first boot camp. I had a phone call. Might have been less than a week. I know it was very close in time, and the letter I had said that I wasn't even a reserve for the reserve. So I could have really walked away. But they said on the phone, they said, look, we just wondered whether you and your horse Henry could make it to Scone for the first boot camp. And I said, absolutely, what an opportunity, absolutely. So I packed him up, put him on the float, and took him to Scone. And he actually, because I'd kept working him, he was a different horse by then. He was a lot better. And lots of practicing in the paddock with the flag, and I thought, oh well, it's something that's going to help him anyway. And so we did the first boot camp, and then I think it was about a couple of months later we had another boot camp, and it might have been 3 boot camps all up before we got selected to go to Castle Hill the 10 days leading up to the opening ceremony, and no one really knew for sure whether they were in or whether they were out or whatever. And it was a pretty tough 10 days there, getting up in the dark of night and going off to the stadium and all the security, and it was a big process, and then coming back exhausted and trying to get some sleep in, but having to feed horses and things like that. Amazing time. And anyway, it was just a couple of days before the actual opening day, and they called 4 of us out the front and said, we want you to slot in here, and that was the leading 4. So we went from the not even a reserve to the reserves to the front row, and it was it was a full circle. Amazing. And I still, if I ever go and talk to young people, I tell them that I don't so much talk about my work. I talk about that story. And yes, and so horses have always been a feature in my work. I've ridden since I was 5. I've got 4 of them in the paddock out there, and I still event with my girlfriends from school. So
fantastic. Now, speaking of horses, of course, your biggest project, well, one of your biggest projects to date would be the sculptor of the great Winks, who recently retired. Of course, we have her here in this barn at the moment, but we're not going to show her until your big unveiling, which has been put back, unfortunately, because of the present situation worldwide. So have you got an idea when we'll expect to be unveiling the statue?
I don't know the date. I don't know. I'm sworn to secrecy of any details. So it's just to watch this space, and hopefully there'll be a good crowd to witness the big event. So I'm very excited.
I'm sure there will be, and like myself, I'll be waited with bated anticipation for the unveiling of the Winks statue. And thank you very much, Tanya, for taking the time out with me and letting people know about your story, Tanya Bartlett. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. It's great. Thank you.
Brad.